Hi, I'm Sailor Eric. If you saw my last Sailor Eric episode, you know that I hosted two riggers from a prominent boatyard in Chicago for a sail on Silverheels, my Pearson 424 Ketch. They seemed to enjoy the sail and provided me with ideas to improve Silverheels rigging. In the last episode, I covered the replacement of the reefing lines. This video will cover the remainder of the improvements either recommended or implemented. The replacement of the line used for the last leg of the topping lift will be a featured part of this video. Another thing the rigger did is he lashed this Clew down onto the boom. You can see that's on this shackle that is a little long, and it was allowing the Clew of the leech of the mainsail to rise up. And he just lashed this down so that it was brought down a little more right along the boom, because it is loose-footed. It's called a loose-footed mainsail, and that gave the sail a bit better performance lashed down onto the boom. So that was on the fly thing that the rigger did while we were sailing. The next item we're going to look at that the rigger has fussed at me about for a long time is the line I'm using for this topping lift. This back apparatus here, this little block, this is the topping lift, which attaches to that block, which is on a stronger wire that goes up to the top of the mast, and that supports the boom, right? It keeps the boom from resting on the gallows below it. So that is a nice feature to have. The gotcha is that he doesn't like that line. That line looks worn, and it's going to fail at some point. It's just a cheap kind of line, very thin, and he strongly encouraged me to replace that line. So we're going to do that next. We're going to comply and address this line. All right, to replace that topping lift old frayed line, I'm going to use this 5/16 New England rope stay set line. I think it, the appropriate lower diameter, lower gauge line. It should be able to fit in that block nicely. I'll verify that and go from there. Okay, I attached this preventer that is coming off of my mizzen mast onto the boom. So when I take the tension off of the topping lift, this preventer should still keep the boom and support it from falling too far, and we'll go from there. And I can always rig a halyard to raise that if I need it. All right, this topping lift is tied off down here. I'm going to ultimately relax that, and it's coming up that block and then up to that block and then back down. It's terminated here. You can see that this looks like a bowline, right? So that's a bowline knot that terminates it, and then it comes up through the block and then down. See, it's got this here, but ultimately it's tensioned down here. So ultimately I'll try tensioning it down there, or figure out where else I'm going to tension it. That's how it's currently rigged. When I take this knot out, that'll reduce the strain on the boom, and then what will take the load of the boom will be that preventer. So that line is kind of tense. There's a little tightness right in there, so when I let that loose, I'm going to have to bring that through and let that loose. And when she does, there we go. See, now the preventer is taking more of the load here, and this is a lot looser. I'm going to be free to pull that out, which I'm going to do now. Alright, you can see this block now is very loose, and it's just being held together. I'm just keeping these lines in place so I can get the other line, cut it to the right length, and replace it. Alright, I measured what I think is an appropriate amount of length on this line. I'm going to cut this line. Okay, done. Now, like before, I'm going to burn the end of these lines. To sear off the fray. There we go. Now that's going to be hot. Do the same over here. I don't touch the ends after I do this, but that should prevent them from, you know, just fraying over time. I can also add something like a little electrical tape at the end to reinforce that, or I can you know, wrap some thread around there. It's not called warping, it's called something else. So I've got this nicer New England ropes stay set line, polyester, synthetic rope, not a lot of stretch. And this guy is tied on here with a bowline, just like this old line is, right? And I can rig this through the block, just like the old line is, right over the top of it. And then when I'm all done, I will pull the old line out. But for now, I can take this new line. Son of a git. Yeah. Nothing ever works quite as planned or quite as smoothly as you want. All right, new line is through the block. It's getting pulled through. All right, and then she comes down through this block down here at the base of the mast, right? Which is what this guy is doing. So she comes down through the base of the mast. Okay, and that block is correctly sized for this kind of line. So the line that was in there was not quite correct. And now this line was tied off on one of these anchor points for the main sheet, right? So now I can ultimately tension this. Tension this with the line coming above this reefing block. Okay. Okay. So now this is taking the tension. And now this line was fastened with a knot over here, which I think I'll use a rolling hitch. All right, you can see ultimately my rolling hitch has most of the loops pointing toward the neck of that connection point over here, and the one loop is away from it. So if I want to tension it, I just move the knot in this direction toward the block, and that's going to tension it. Okay, now I'm going to take off this loose old line. It's time to take that off. All right, we're going to take this guy off. He's going to come off here. This is just a bowline, but it's been tied on there for a while, so it's going to require a little bit of love to get off. You can see I'm just loosening that guy up. There you go, he's off. He's in there pretty good. Because of this preventer, which I can now take off, I think. The preventer can come off because my new line should be supporting this boom. There you go, preventer's out. And I can just let that fall free. Okay. And now this line's got to come out. There you go. That line's now out, and it's going to come out of the block above. That's the last step. All right, so swapped out that old line for a new one. All right, see that pretty New England rope topping lift? I think Dave's going to like that. All right, the next item we discussed was ultimately moving, at minimum, the main halyard into an in-mast hauling system. So basically, the side that you haul on, or the working end of the halyard, will come through the mast and will come out probably around here. Will probably come out around here. And just imagine that you drill kind of a long hole, oblong hole in the mast, and that line feeds out of it. And then you can put like an anchor lock, like a lock, a cleat. Here, I'll show you. Like this. You can ultimately put this right below it, and just imagine that the working end comes out through, and then you just lock it down from the mast. He suggested that the spinnaker halyard and the stay sail halyard, for that matter, could all ultimately be rigged up like that. But the first one that we're going to focus on is probably going to be the main. One thing that I am worried about is the amount of electrical wires that are in there. This is an old boat. It was built in 1978. There's probably some zombie wires in there. And I tried to run a wire in that mast, and it wasn't easy. So, you know, using a messenger to pull a wire or a halyard through there is not straightforward. And the more things you put in there, the more congested it gets. And you can just imagine if you have friction or congestion within the mast, that's not going to be great. But, you know, I trust that rigger, and we are going to look into that. The idea of, again, one side of the rigging, one side of the halyard comes out of the mast. So it's inside the mast going all the way up to the sheave. It comes down the mast, out that hole, and that's what we pull on to raise the main. And the benefit of that is that that side will no longer be subject to those steps, right? Because if you've seen previous videos of mine, you'll know that one of the things you got to look out for when you raise that main is the steps on the main. That halyard is very easily fouled or entwined into those steps, so you need to make sure it's clear in order to do that. So if it's in mast, that is one less thing you have to worry about. All right, the last thing the rigger and I talked about was this attachment point. We raised the staysail, right? The staysail. Let me give you kind of a bird's eye view, right? I'm behind that small forward sail, right? It's called the staysail. There's the main, sorry, it's the foresail or the jib on this boat. That's a Genoa, it can be called. But this small forward sail is called the staysail, and that's because it's hanked on this small wire that goes up to the spreader, and that's called a baby stay. And the attachment point, or tack, it's called, of the sail is this little wire down here. It's this little, you know, you've got a shackle that's connected to a wire loop, that's connected to another wire loop that is on a thimble, that's connected to this snatch block or snap block, right? The rigger didn't like that. He says, he's like, you know, this can become entangled up here, and this thing is just likely to fail at some point. So he just suggested replacing this with a line. So just imagine pulling this pin out, pulling this wire out, and replacing the connection with a very small, very strong line, maybe bowlines on either side. That's not something I'm going to do today, but that's on the list. What I did do is I attached that so that it wasn't ensnarled or entangled around this other block, which is the actual stay itself. So the stay on the turnbuckle here is snap shackled on right there, and that was kind of like entangled. This tack of the sail was entangled around that, which was even worse because it was creating like a little crimp in there, a crease where you can imagine tension would form, and it would shorten the lifetime of this particular small little piece. So again, he was suggesting just replace this wire piece with a little length of polyester strong line. Some of the tools I used during the filming of this video include a rigger's knife, a butane lighter, and polyester double braided line. So I will include links to those products in the description in case you're interested to look up how much they cost or where they're available. I appreciate you spending some time with me during this fine sunny Sunday at Monroe Harbor. And that concludes the video for today, or the things I'm going to cover. So I wish you fair winds and following seas.